Montana Territory, 1882. The Bitter Creek Ranch stretched across the valley like a kingdom, its boundaries marked not by fences but by the whispered legends of its ruthless owner. It was a place where men came to forget their pasts and horses came to be broken. And for 24-year-old Colton Chambers, it had been both sanctuary and prison for 3 long years. Horses are tools, boy. Nothing more, Randall Blackstone, the ranch owner, had told him on his first day. Sentiment gets you killed out here. Colton had nodded, already knowing this truth. The frontier had taken his family in a Sioux raid when he was 16, and since then, he'd learned that attachment only gave fate something to take from you. The mountains didn't care about your feelings. The prairie didn't weep for your losses. Surviving meant staying hard, staying alone, and never letting anything or anyone matter too much. At dawn, Colton stood in the corral, watching the new Mustang they'd captured yesterday. The stallion's coat gleamed black in the early light, his eyes wild with defiance. The animal had already injured 2 ranch hands who'd tried to approach him. "Going to break him today?" asked Jerome, an older ranch hand with leathery skin from decades under the Montana sun. "That's the plan," Colton replied, his voice quiet. He had a gift with horses, not kindness exactly, but understanding. He recognized their fear because he carried so much of his own. "Blackstone wants him ready for the army buyers next week," Jerome said, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. "Says to break him hard and fast." Colton nodded, his face expressionless. Breaking horses quickly meant breaking them cruelly, an approach he used efficiently, if mechanically. He was the best horse breaker on the ranch precisely because he remained detached. No sentiment, just the job. What no one at Bitter Creek knew was that sometimes, late at night, Colton would slip into the stables and whisper apologies to the animals he'd broken during the day. It was the only weakness he allowed himself, this small acknowledgement of the guilt that festered inside him. But in the hard light of day, he was exactly what the frontier demanded: unfeeling, efficient, alone. 3 miles away, at the modest Rose Hill Ranch, 20-year-old Hannah Reed stood on her porch, staring at the letter in her hands. Her auburn hair, usually neatly pinned, had escaped its constraints in her distress, falling in waves past her shoulders and catching the morning light. "We regret to inform you that your father's debts exceed the value of his holdings," she read aloud for the 3rd time, her voice trembling. Her father had been dead less than a month, buried on the small hill behind their modest ranch house. The consumption had taken him quickly, leaving Hannah alone with a struggling horse ranch, mounting debts, and a dozen horses that were more family than livestock. "I won't lose you," she promised, looking out at the small herd grazing in the morning mist. "I won't lose this place." But the banker's letter made it clear. Without $400 by the end of the month, the Rose Hill Ranch would be sold to cover her father's debts. Hannah smoothed her simple blue calico dress, squared her shoulders, and made a decision. "Mr. Peabody," she addressed her father's elderly foreman, who'd stayed on despite not being paid for weeks. "I'm riding to Bitter Creek today. They're hiring ranch hands for the season." The old man's eyes widened. "Blackstone don't hire women, Miss Hannah." "Then he won't be hiring Hannah Reed," she replied, a determined glint in her green eyes. "Tell anyone who asks that I've gone to stay with my aunt and Helena for a while." That afternoon, with her hair tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat and wearing her late brother's clothes, Hannah Reed rode toward Bitter Creek Ranch. Her hands trembled slightly on the reins, but her gaze remained steady on the horizon. Survival in the Montana Territory meant doing whatever was necessary, even if it meant becoming someone else entirely. Colton watched the black stallion rear and strike at the corral fence, its eyes rolling white with fear. "That one's devil spawn," said Silas, another ranch hand. "Better put a bullet in him before he kills somebody." Colton said nothing, studying the animal's movements. This wasn't just wildness. The horse was terrified. As he moved closer to the fence, he noticed raw, infected wounds on the animal's flanks. Someone had already tried breaking this horse using spurs and pain. "I'll handle him," Colton said, his voice betraying nothing of the anger he felt. That evening, as the ranch hands gathered for dinner, Blackstone announced a new hire. "This here's Harry Reed," he said, gesturing toward a slight figure standing uncertainly by the bunkhouse door. "Just signed on. Says he knows horses." Colton glanced up briefly. The newcomer was young. Too young, maybe, with delicate features and hands that looked too soft for ranch work. But there was a determined set to his jaw that Colton recognized. It was the look of someone with nowhere else to go. Put him on stable duty, Blackstone ordered Foreman Willis. We'll see if he's worth keeping. Later that night, unable to sleep, Colton walked to the corrals. The black stallion stood trembling in the moonlight, his sides heaving with each breath. Without consciously deciding to, Colton found himself climbing the fence, a handful of oats in his palm. Easy, he murmured, keeping his voice low. No one's going to hurt you tonight. The horse snorted, backing away. I know, Colton continued. I wouldn't trust me either. A sound behind him made him turn sharply. The new hand, Harry, stood watching, eyes wide. You shouldn't be here, Colton said coldly. Go back to the bunkhouse. But Harry stepped closer, eyes on the stallion. He's injured, he said, and something in the voice made Colton look more carefully at the young ranch hand. Those cuts need cleaning, Harry continued, pulling a small jar from a pocket. I always carried salve for the horses. Colton almost refused, almost sent the newcomer away with a harsh word. But instead, he found himself nodding. Together, they approached the nervous stallion, speaking in low, calm voices. As Harry applied the salve to the wounds, Colton held the animal steady, feeling the tremors running through its powerful body. He's been mistreated, Harry said, voice tight with controlled anger. Someone tried breaking him through cruelty. That's how it's done, Colton replied flatly. Harry looked up then, green eyes flashing in the moonlight. No, that's how men with no skill or patience do it. A horse can be gentled without being broken. Colton frowned. Blackstone doesn't pay us to gentle horses. He pays us to break them. And is that what you want to be? Someone who breaks living things? The question struck Colton like a physical blow. For 3 years, he'd been exactly that, a breaker of spirits. He'd told himself it was just survival, just the way of the frontier. But in this moment, faced with this stranger's quiet challenge, something long dormant stirred within him. What's your real name? Colton asked suddenly. The young ranch hand stiffened. Harry Reed, came the reply, but the voice wavered slightly. No, Colton said. I don't think it is. Their eyes held for a long moment, and in that gaze, something dangerous and unexpected passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or possibility. The stallion needs water, Harry finally said, breaking the moment. And rest. If Blackstone sees him like this tomorrow, he'll have him shot. Let me worry about Blackstone, Colton replied, surprised by his own words. You get some sleep. First day's always the hardest. As Harry walked away, Colton turned back to the stallion, who was now standing quietly, eyes half closed as the pain of his wounds eased. What are you doing, Chambers? He muttered to himself. But he already knew. For the first time in years, he was caring about something other than mere survival. And on the frontier, that was the most dangerous thing a man could do. Over the next week, Hannah, disguised as Harry, found herself assigned to work alongside Colton Chambers. The disguise was terrifying to maintain. Each morning she bound her chest tightly, tucked every strand of auburn hair beneath her hat, and deepened her voice to a believable pitch. She kept to herself, volunteered for the dirtiest jobs, and avoided the bunkhouse whenever possible. But it was working. The wages were good, and if she could last the month, she might save the Rosehill Ranch. More surprisingly, she found herself drawn to Colton in a way that complicated everything. He wasn't like the other ranch hands. Where they were loud and boastful, he was quiet and watchful. Where they were cruel to the horses, he was firm but never needlessly harsh. And each night, when everyone else slept, he would visit the black stallion they'd secretly named Midnight, bringing water and oats, checking the healing wounds. My father believed horses remember kindness, Hannah said one evening as they sat on the corral fence, watching Midnight grow steadily stronger. He said a horse saved with kindness will give loyalty beyond measure. Colton glanced at her, his expression unreadable in the fading light. Your father sounds like a dreamer. The frontier doesn't reward dreamers. What does it reward, then? Those willing to be as hard as the land itself, he replied. But something in his tone suggested he no longer fully believed his own words. Each night, they worked with Midnight, using patience instead of force. Hannah showed Colton techniques her father had taught her, ways to build trust rather than break spirit. And slowly, Something began to change between them as well. Conversation came easier. Silence grew comfortable rather than tense. One evening, as Hannah demonstrated how to approach Midnight from his blind spot without startling him, Colton asked the question she'd been dreading. Why are you really here? Harry. Hannah froze, her heart hammering. I need the money, she answered honestly. Same as everyone. There are easier ranches to work than Bitter Creek, he pressed. And you're not like the others. Your hands, he reached out, taking her wrist gently. They're too fine for someone who's worked horses all his life. Hannah pulled away, panic rising. I should go, she said, turning toward the bunkhouse. Wait, Colton called softly. I didn't mean, he sighed. Whatever your secrets are, they're yours to keep. I just wanted to say thank you. For what? For reminding me there's another way. His eyes found hers in the darkness. With the horses. With everything. That night, Hannah lay awake in her bunk, her mind racing. She was falling for him. This quiet, damaged cowboy with gentle hands and sad eyes. And it was impossible. Not just because of her disguise, but because she was fighting to save her ranch while he belonged to Bitter Creek. Their worlds could never merge. Yet as the days passed, something undeniable grew between them. Colton began to smile, small, fleeting expressions that transformed his face. He spoke more, telling her about his childhood in Kansas, his dreams of someday having his own small ranch. He never mentioned his family, and Hannah never asked, recognizing the shadows that passed over his features whenever the subject approached. By the end of the second week, Midnight would come to Colton's whistle, would allow himself to be touched and groomed. The stallion's wild spirit remained intact, but now it was tempered with trust. He'll never be truly broken, Hannah observed one evening. No, Colton agreed. And he shouldn't be. Hannah looked at him, seeing how much he'd changed in such a short time. What happens when Blackstone wants him ready for the army buyers? Colton's expression hardened. I'll tell him the horse isn't suitable. Too unpredictable. He won't like that. No, Colton agreed. But I'm tired of breaking things for that man. The moment hung between them, charged with something Hannah dared not name. Then Colton reached out, his fingertips barely brushing her cheek. There's dirt, he explained softly, but his touch lingered a heartbeat too long. Hannah stepped back, her disguise suddenly feeling like a physical weight. She was living a lie, one that grew more dangerous with each passing day. And now there was this impossible connection that made her want to reveal everything. But she couldn't. Not yet. Not until the Rosehill Ranch was safe. The next morning, everything changed. Hannah had risen before dawn to tend to Midnight, bringing fresh water and salve for the nearly healed wounds. She was inside the corral, speaking softly to the stallion, when Blackstone's voice cut through the early morning stillness. What the hell is this? Hannah turned to find the ranch owner standing at the gate, his face dark with anger. Beside him stood Willis, the foreman, looking grim. Sir, you were just coddling a horse that should have been broken weeks ago, Blackstone growled, stepping into the corral. Willis tells me you and Chambers have been sneaking out here every night, turning my stock into pampered pets. Hannah's throat went dry. The horse was injured. I don't care what you've been doing, Blackstone interrupted. This animal was meant for the army. Now he's worthless, following you around like a dog. He pulled his revolver from its holster. Might as well put him down and be done with it. No. Hannah moved between Blackstone and the stallion. Please, sir. He's nearly healed. He can still be trained. Get out of my way, boy, Blackstone ordered, raising the gun. I can't let you do that. Her voice was steady despite her racing heart. The ranch owner's eyes narrowed dangerously. You're fired, Reed. Get your things and get off my property before I decide a bullet's too good for this horse and give it to you instead. Mr. Blackstone, please. Now, Reed. Hannah stood her ground, even as her mind raced with desperate calculations. Without this job, the Rosehill Ranch was lost. But if she walked away now, Midnight would die. The stallion nudged her shoulder gently, as if sensing her distress. I'll buy him, she said suddenly. Blackstone laughed. With what? Ranch hands don't have that kind of money. I have savings, Hannah lied. I'll give you $50 for him. He's worth 3 times that. Not if you're just going to shoot him, she countered. $50 for a horse you consider worthless. Blackstone studied her for a long moment, his expression calculating. 75, he finally said. Cash. Today. Then you both leave and don't come back. Done, Hannah agreed, though she had no idea how she would find the money. As Blackstone walked away, she leaned against Midnight's strong neck, trembling with the aftermath of confrontation and fear. She'd saved the horse, but lost her job and any chance of saving her ranch. And she hadn't even said goodbye to Colton. "Harry," his voice came from behind her, and she turned to find Colton standing at the corral gate, confusion written across his features. "What happened?" "I heard shouting." Hannah explained the confrontation, watching his expression shift from concern to anger. "I'm sorry," he said when she finished. "This is my fault too. I should have known Blackstone would find out." "It doesn't matter now," Hannah replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "But I need to find $75 by sundown, or midnight." She couldn't finish the sentence. Colton was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. Then he looked at her with sudden determination. "I have money saved. Almost 3 years' worth. It's yours." Hannah stared at him. "I can't take your savings." "Yes, you can," he insisted. "I've been saving for something that matters." "This does." The generosity overwhelmed her. "Why would you do this?" Colton stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Because in 3 years at Bitter Creek, you're the only person who's made me remember there's more to life than just surviving." His hand reached up, hesitating near her face before falling back to his side. "I don't know who you really are, Harry Reid, but you've reminded me who I used to be." Hannah felt tears threatening and blinked them away furiously. Her secret pressed against her lips, demanding release, but fear held it back. If she told him now, would he still look at her with that same gentle regard? "Thank you," she whispered instead. "I'll find a way to repay you." "Just take care of that horse," Colton replied. "And yourself." By noon, Hannah had Blackstone's money, Colton's entire savings, counted out in worn bills and coins that represented years of hard work and sacrifice. She signed the bill of sale with shaking hands, aware that Blackstone was watching her with suspicious eyes. "There's something not right about you, Reid," the ranch owner said as she pocketed the paper. "Always was." Hannah said nothing, focusing on preparing Midnight for the journey back to Rosehill. The stallion was still weak, but he followed her willingly, trusting her completely now. As she mounted her own horse and took Midnight's lead rope, Hannah searched the ranch yard for Colton. He stood by the stables, watching her with an expression that made her heart ache. She raised her hand in farewell, wishing desperately for different circumstances, a different time, a different life where she could tell him everything. He nodded once, a gesture so filled with unspoken feeling that Hannah had to turn away before her composure broke entirely. Then she rode away from Bitter Creek Ranch, leading Midnight toward an uncertain future, leaving behind the man who had begun to matter more than she could afford to admit. Dawn broke clear and cold the next morning at Rosehill Ranch. Hannah stood on the porch, watching the sun paint the eastern sky in shades of gold and pink. She'd returned late the previous night, Midnight following obediently behind her mare. Mr. Peabody had said nothing about her male attire, only nodded as if he'd expected nothing less from Jacob Reed's daughter. Now, dressed again in her simple blue dress, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders, Hannah felt both relief and disorientation. The disguise was gone, but so was her plan to save the ranch. She'd spent Colton's money, all of it, to save a horse. The nobility of the gesture provided little comfort as she faced the reality of losing her home. "At least you're safe," she told Midnight, who grazed peacefully in the small corral near the house. The stallion lifted his head at the sound of her voice, ears pricked forward attentively. A distant sound drew Hannah's attention. Horsemen, approaching from the east, not the direction of town. She squinted against the morning light, counting 1, 2, then many more riders cresting the hill that marked the boundary of Rosehill. "Miss Hannah," Mr. Peabody called, hurrying from the barn. "We've got company." Hannah's hand went to her throat. Blackstone. It was her first fear, that somehow he'd discovered her deception and followed her home. But as the riders came closer, Hannah realized it wasn't Blackstone. It was Colton, riding at the front of a procession unlike anything she'd ever seen. Behind him came horses, dozens, then scores of them. Every horse from the Bitter Creek Ranch, it seemed, following him across the valley toward Rosehill. Hannah descended the porch steps slowly, disbelief rendering her motionless as the extraordinary cavalcade approached. Colton rode directly to her, reining in his mount. His face showed evidence of a recent fight, a split lip, a darkening bruise along his jaw. But his eyes were clearer than she'd ever seen them. "Hannah Reed," he said, and the sound of her real name on his lips made her breath catch. "You knew," she whispered. "Not at first," he admitted. "But I suspected something the night you called the black stallion by a name your father used to use." Hannah's eyes widened. "How could you know that?" "Because Jacob Reed was famous among horsemen," Colton said. "I heard stories about Rosehill Ranch for years, about a man who could gentle the wildest Mustang with patience instead of force." His eyes softened. "When you said your father believed horses remember kindness, I knew who you were." Hannah looked past him at the horses still arriving, spreading out across her pasture. "But what is this?" Colton dismounted, standing before her with a strange mix of defiance and uncertainty. "After you left, Blackstone was furious. He ordered me to round up the best horses for the army buyers coming today. But I couldn't do it, couldn't go back to breaking spirits." He gestured to his bruised face. "We had a disagreement about that." "So you stole his horses?" Hannah asked incredulously. "I liberated them," Colton corrected with the ghost of a smile. "And I didn't come alone." From behind him emerged other riders, a half-dozen ranch hands from Bitter Creek, including old Jerome and several others Hannah recognized. "Turns out I wasn't the only one tired of Blackstone's methods," Colton explained. "When I told them I was leaving and why, they decided to join me." Jerome spat tobacco juice and grinned. "Been waiting years for someone to stand up to that old tyrant." Hannah shook her head, overwhelmed. "But why bring them here?" Colton's expression grew serious. "Because you saved one horse at the cost of everything. Because your father was right about kindness. And because—" he hesitated, then continued with quiet intensity. "Because in 3 years of believing the frontier was just about surviving alone, you showed me it could be about living together." Hannah felt tears filling her eyes, unable to speak. "I know you need money to save your ranch," Colton continued. "These horses, trained properly, with your father's methods, could bring enough to pay off those debts and more. And if you're willing—" his confidence faltered. "If you're willing, I'd like to stay and help. These men too. We all want to be part of something better than what we left behind." Hannah looked at the horses spreading across her land, almost 200 of them, from yearlings to proven stock. A fortune in horse flesh, yes, but also a chance to continue her father's legacy of humane training. And Colton standing before her, offering not just help but a future she'd stopped believing possible. "Blackstone will come after you," she said. "After all of you." "Let him try," Jerome called out. "We've got enough men and guns to give him second thoughts. And enough witnesses to his crooked dealings to keep the law on our side," added another ranch hand. Hannah looked at Colton, really looked at him, seeing the man he truly was beneath the hard shell the frontier had forced upon him. "You gave me your savings yesterday," she said softly. "Today you're giving me your future." "What?" Colton stepped closer, close enough that she could see flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Because yesterday I gave you my money," he said quietly. "But I've been giving you my heart since the night we saved that stallion together." A murmur of good-natured teasing rose from the gathered ranch hands, but Hannah barely heard them. All she could see was Colton. All she could feel was the certainty that this impossible, extraordinary moment was exactly where her life had been leading all along. "Then stay," she whispered. "All of you. Let's build something new here, something that honors both strength and kindness." Colton's smile transformed his face completely, erasing the last traces of the hardened man she'd first met at Bitter Creek. Behind them, Midnight approached the fence, nickering softly in recognition. "Seems he approves," Colton said, glancing at the stallion. Hannah laughed, a sound of pure joy that seemed to echo across the valley. "One horse saved leads to 200 more. My father would have called that frontier justice." As the men began organizing the horses and Mr. Peabody hurried to prepare food for their unexpected guests, Colton took Hannah's hand in his touch gentle but strong. "I don't know what comes next," he admitted. "I just know I want to face it with you." Hannah interlaced her fingers with his, feeling the calluses that matched her own, hands shaped by the same work, the same struggles, the same frontier that had tried to break them both. "What comes next," she said with newfound certainty, "is we stop just surviving and start truly living." 6 months later, the Rosehill Ranch had transformed. New stables lined the expanded corral area, and a sign at the entrance proclaimed, Rose Hill Horse Training. Gentling, not breaking. The reputation of the ranch had spread quickly across 3 territories, bringing buyers willing to pay premium prices for horses trained using Jacob Reed's humane methods. The debts were long paid off. The ranch hands who had followed Colton from Bitter Creek had become loyal employees, sharing in the ranch's growing prosperity. Blackstone had indeed come looking for his horses, but facing armed men and witnesses to his illegal business practices, he'd been forced to retreat. Now there were rumors he was selling Bitter Creek and leaving the territory altogether. On a crisp autumn evening, Hannah stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains. The door opened behind her, and Colton stepped out, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thinking about your father?" he asked, handing her one of the cups. Hannah smiled, accepting both the coffee and the warmth of his presence beside her. "Wondering what he would think of all this," she admitted. "Of how much has changed." "He'd be proud," Colton said with certainty. "His methods, his philosophy, they're changing how horses are trained across the territory. And his daughter is at the heart of it all." Hannah leaned against his shoulder, content in a way she'd never imagined possible 6 months ago. "Not just me," she corrected gently. "Us." In the nearby pasture, Midnight grazed peacefully among the mares selected for the ranch's breeding program. The stallion's spirit remained unbroken, his partnership with humans based on trust rather than fear. He had become the living symbol of the ranch's philosophy and the beginning of their shared story. "I have something for you," Colton said suddenly, setting down his coffee cup. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box, carved with intricate patterns of horses running free. Hannah's heart quickened as he opened it, revealing a simple gold band. "I've been carrying this for weeks," Colton admitted, his voice husky with emotion, "waiting for the right moment. But then I realized, every moment with you is the right moment." He took her hand, his eyes finding hers in the fading light. "Hannah Reed, you taught me that the frontier isn't just about surviving alone. It's about building something worth living for together. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Hannah's eyes as she nodded, words momentarily beyond her. "Yes," she finally whispered. "Yes." As Colton slipped the ring onto her finger, Hannah thought about the journey that had brought them here, from a desperate young woman disguised as a ranch hand to save her home, to a man who had believed the frontier had no place for connection. From one saved horse to 200, from solitary survival to shared prosperity. "I used to believe the frontier was too harsh for love," Colton said, echoing her thoughts as he drew her close. "That caring for anything or anyone was a weakness that would get you killed out here." "And now?" Hannah asked, her arms encircling his waist. "Now I know the truth," he replied, his voice filled with certainty. "Out here, love isn't weakness. It's the only strength that truly matters." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, they sealed their promise with a kiss that held all the wildness and tenderness of the frontier that had both challenged and united them. A kiss that spoke of a future built not on breaking, but on saving, not on surviving alone, but on living together. And in the pasture beyond, as if offering his own blessing, Midnight lifted his proud head and called out to the evening sky, no longer a broken spirit, but a free one. Just like the 2 souls who had saved him and, in doing so, found their way to each other.